Hello and welcome to today's American Nuclear Society program, Spending Time on Spent Nuclear Fuel with the Department of Energy. I'm Steve Nesbitt, the founder of LMNT Consulting and a former ANS president. I'm pleased to serve as the moderator for today's conversation with Paul Murray. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few brief notes. Today's program is being sponsored by the ANS Trustees of Nuclear, the Society's premier corporate membership program aimed at improving nuclear literacy in our schools, our conversations with policymakers, and our larger public discourse. To learn more, visit ans.org/trustees. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A function. I will attempt to address as many questions as possible. The event will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be emailed to event registrants tomorrow. Additionally, certificates of attendance for the event are available by request. Please see the chat for contact information. And finally, we ask that all participants adhere to the ANS Code of Ethics and Respectful Behavior Policy, which can be found at ans.org. With those notes out of the way, I'd like to introduce our special guest, Paul Murray. Paul is a Deputy Assistant Secretary for Spent Fuel and Waste Disposition for the U.S. Department of Energy, Office of Nuclear Energy. I'm sure you're all familiar with the acronym, but we'll just be referring to them as DOE from now on. These responsibilities include managing DOE's consent-based siting initiative and directing research to establish an integrated system for the storage, transportation, and disposal of the nation's spent nuclear fuel and high-level radioactive waste. Prior to joining the Office of Nuclear Energy, Paul served as Chief Technology Officer and Senior Vice President for Orano Federal Services from 2007 to 2023. One of the significant projects Paul worked on was the high burnup spent fuel storage demonstration project at Dominion Energy's North Anna plant. I hope we'll talk some more about that project in a little while. As you can tell by his accent, Paul is not originally from around here. Paul is a graduate of Liverpool University in the United Kingdom, and he began his professional journey with the UK Ministry of Defence, where he worked on refit, commissioning, and design of propulsion systems and reactors for nuclear submarines. It's a particular pleasure for me to do this interview with Paul because we've been friends for a long time. We actually lived in the same neighborhood in Charlotte, North Carolina, until he moved to the Washington, D.C. area recently. Let me set the stage with a few comments, and then we'll dive into questions. As most of you know, the U.S. government program to manage spent nuclear fuel is at an impasse. In 1982, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act gave DOE the responsibility for managing and disposing of spent nuclear fuel and high-level radioactive waste. However, in 2010, DOE terminated work on the Yucca Mountain Repository Project, eliminated the Office of Civilian Radioactive Waste Management, and transferred many of the federal responsibilities to the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy, or NE. The current status of spent fuel and high-level waste management is that there's about 90,000 tons of spent fuel being stored on reactor sites across the country. There's no work on Yucca Mountain or any other geologic repository site. Private consolidated storage facility projects have obtained NRC approval in Utah, Texas, and New Mexico, but were stalled due primarily to host state opposition. With that cheery background behind us, welcome, Paul. Is there anything you'd like to say first, or shall we dive into some questions?
I'd just like to say thank you for doing this, Steve, and thank you for ANS for hosting this, and let's dive into the questions.
Great. So you've been through some major transitions recently, professionally and personally, moving from the garden spot of Charlotte, North Carolina to Washington, D.C., and taking a high visibility U.S. government job after decades in private industry. So how's that working for you?
Oh, I lived in Charlotte for 24 years, believe it or not, Steve. Some of the neighbors were a little bit questionable, and my dog does particularly miss one lawn when we do our morning walks in the morning now. It was hard to move. We live now north of Washington, D.C., up near Ellicott City. About a quarter of a mile away from the entrance to the Patapsco State Park, so I can get to go walk in for miles and miles, which is one of the things that I enjoy in life. Dog hates it, by the way, now, but I still enjoy it. I get to commute as well, an hour and a half each way on the MARC train, So I get to do my emails each morning and each evening. So it's different, Steve. So I'm a commuter.
Well, we appreciate the sacrifices that you and others in government service make. We really do, because I know there's lots of challenges there.
Yeah.
I want to note that you were recently named as one of 8 people to watch in nuclear energy. So congratulations for that. Energy Wire noted that the problem of what to do with nuclear waste falls squarely on you. How do you feel about that?
I'd hope I'm up to the challenge, Steve. You know me, I'm not one to sit still. I'd like to actually be doing stuff. And so as we talk today, I hope we get the chance to really explain what I'm going to try and do and where I'm going to try and take the program. So
yeah, we definitely will. And kind of along those lines, I know expectations are high. Is there a disconnect between what DOE is expected to do in the area of spent fuel and high level waste and what it can actually currently do based on statutory restrictions and funding?
No, so people have got to remember that, people think that DOE can just go and execute what it wants to do. I really have to work at the direction of Congress. So Congress really directs me what to do. The yearly appropriations direct me in what I can do. And so I interpret to the best of my ability what Congress is asking me to do, and I move forward. And as we talk, I believe that the congressional language, which I currently have, allows me to move forward with this vision that I want to implement and start moving the ball down the field for us. Okay.
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 So sort of getting to where you want to take the program. You've been Deputy Assistant Secretary for a while now. Have you established specific objectives for the waste program? So please just go ahead and lay those out. Let us know where you see us go.
So first of all, this is the end of month 4, right? So people probably think the bugger's been there forever, but it's the end of month 4 for me. Okay. So first of all, first month is really getting to know people, do the training, understand what the current program is, and understand all the bits and pieces and the constraints. One of the things that I want to say is that DOE NE and DOE NE8 is not the Office of Civilian Rad Waste Management, right? We at the moment are very R&D focused, and we have to basically change that focus to be able to start making progress as we move forward. Okay, we have a mission mandated by Congress to use the consent-based siting process to look at building 1 or more federally owned interim storage facilities. Right? That's mandated, and that's what we're doing. So in implementing my vision, I need to do a series of small steps that builds public trust and confidence on the Hill and with the community, but we're actually starting to make progress now. So what am I going to do? What I'm going to do is go in, starting with the interim storage facility. We are designing right now the government-owned facility to DOE Order 413 Part B, which is the government project management process. We actually complete a major milestone this spring, CD0. So at that point, we'll have the concept design, rough order of magnitude costs, everything we need. The independent cost analysis has come back and pretty much said we're pretty much spot on for the numbers, right? Now we go through the risk panel and we go through the secretary approval. When we got CD0 approved, we then start, that's the start of the project, right? Now you've got approval to actually request funds to start funding your project. So CD1 should start hopefully later this year. That's when we start to do the alternatives analysis. What will the design look like? Is it a big parking lot? Is it underground? Is it up in the air? Is it in the building? So CD1 is really the big start of the project for us. We aim to have the facility designed, built, commissioned in the late 2030s. So that's the timeline we're on for that. The other big milestone we have this year is the rail car. So the safest rail car in the US for transporting material, the Atlas rail car, will finish its testing in the spring. It has a little bit of retesting to do because we changed some things, but essentially it's finished, ready to go in the spring. Right? So retesting probably another 12 months after that. This helps to build public trust. You know, there's been a lot of high-profile train derailments. The last thing we want is for if we start transporting spent nuclear fuel, that something happens. So we've designed and built this rail car, and we will use that for all future shipments of spent nuclear fuel. So once again, public trust is everything. You'll hear me say this over and over and over again today. We have to have public trust for what we're trying to do. One of the things I would like to do is a package performance test, not a package performance qualification, a package performance test. I want to try and blow it up. I want to drop it. I want to crash a train into it. I want to drop it in the lake. I want to pick it out of the lake. I want to set it on fire. I want to put fire out. And then I want to put it on the back of a rail car and drive it off into a sunset, and all the TikTokers can video it. At the same time, I'm toying with the idea. Okay, people see that, you know, people see online videos of used fuel casks crashing into a wall. Is there something we can do at the same time that people can relate to? Do we use a refrigerator and crash that into a wall at the same time? Do we use a car and crash that into a wall at the same time? See what happens to everyday objects at the same time. You know, used fuel cask is going to bounce off, but people can relate to it when they see the car concertina. So once again, public trust. I really want to move the high burnup demo cask, right? By 2027.
I was going to ask you about that if you didn't say something. So I'm glad you brought it up.
Okay, so we are currently looking at how to do this. And so 2077, we're going to move the high burnup metal cask on the back of our fancy new Atlas rail car. Right? Where it's going, we haven't decided yet. But then here's my next dilemma. 2027 to late 2030. So 2027, I move the high burnup rail cask. Late 2030s, my government facility, I call it mine, but the government facility is open. I have a long hiatus in that time. So how do I maintain interest, public trust during that time? So I've been reading a lot of documents in these first 4 months, Steve, and one of them is the Blue Ribbon Commission report, which I'm sure we'll talk about more later, but the Blue Ribbon Commission report actually makes a recommendation to do a demonstration between 2 shutdown reactor sites. Right? You move fuel from one site to another site. Okay, I'm not authorized to do that, but I want to explore the feasibility, possibility as a way to build capability, build public trust, and build the infrastructure I need to be able to implement a large-scale transfer of spent nuclear fuel in the late 2030s. Okay. Another thing that I'm doing is consent-based siting will continue. Right? Very early stages of consent-based siting. We have funded, amongst other things, 12 consortia, and now out there trying to educate members of the public. No, educate's the wrong word. Talk to members of the public about spent nuclear fuel, transportation, storage. At this stage, we really are not trying to cite anything. We're just trying to talk to people, get the feel for the, you know, what people truly believe what spent nuclear fuel is and stuff like that. We all know that, you know, if you live within 5 miles of a nuclear reactor, you know it's there. If you live 10 miles away from a nuclear reactor, you don't know it's there. If you live 15 miles away, what's a nuclear reactor? So these initial consortia are going out to just talk not to cite, just to talk and raise the awareness of the issue and answer people's questions. So the other thing that's happening now as well is there's a lot of money and interest in advanced reactors. And so the spent nuclear fuel coming out of those advanced reactors is interesting. You know, we've got to, as a government, ultimately take ownership of that fuel and put it into a geological repository. Some of those fuel types don't exactly match up to original waste that we considered to go into a repository. And plus, the original waste that we were looking at to go into the repository 30, 40 years ago isn't what we've got 30 or 40 years later. So we have the chance now to go back and look at the waste acceptance criteria for a future repository. Also, potentially look at the order in which the waste is shipped to the repository. Everything's open at this moment in time. 40 years ago, we had a concept. Today, we have the chance to go back and re-examine that concept. So that's something else I'd like to do. On the repository side of things, I've asked my team to go back and go back almost to square one, go back to the generic repository model. How does the repository behave? Not the waste form going into the repository. Does the total system performance behave as opposed to the individual packages of waste? Start again right at the beginning to move forward. We also do a lot of international collaboration. You know, a lot of countries are moving forward with deep repositories. We will continue to collaborate. I've just this morning got a list of all the countries we're collaborating with, and it's really quite extensive. And one of the things we have to consider as we move forward is there a benefit or a need for an underground research laboratory to help us make a determination of the future long-term disposal site for the US? So that's something else we're kicking around. So I'm going to stop because I'm babbling on a bit here and let you ask your next question.
Well, you begged a few while you were going through that, so I'm going to pull on a couple of those loose strings right now. I will also note we're getting a lot of questions from the audience, and I will guarantee we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but you've already addressed some of them, and others will try to sort of bundle together and make sure they're covered. So on the high burn up demo program, I'm just going to take a second and remind folks that what that consists of is a spent fuel storage cask that was loaded with high burn up fuel from reactors, actually from Dominion's reactors, and heavily instrumented, put into place, lots of measurements taken on some of the details of the dry storage process and temperatures, et cetera. And that project's been going on for some years at North Anna. And the idea is to take that cask and take it somewhere and open it up and look inside and verify what we all expect to see, that the spent fuel really didn't change much during its period of storage there. So I'll just take my hat off to you because you're the guy that came up with the crazy idea in the first place, I believe, about 10 years ago or maybe more, and convinced a bunch of other folks that it was a good idea. And I think it's been a very successful program. And I think we need to not lose sight of the fact that we do things right once in a while. So
yes, we do.
I appreciate your interest in finishing that off and not just letting it sit there forever, but let's do the rest of the project as well. And you talked a little bit about repositories, but obviously there's not much going on. We're kind of at loggerheads from a policy perspective on repositories because the law of the land, the Nuclear Waste Policy Act, says, hey, it needs to be Yucca Mountain. That's what we need to do. But Congress is not willing to appropriate any money for that purpose. And that's been the case for well over a decade. And it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So maybe that's one of those that falls into the category of, you've got to get your marching orders from Congress, right?
So,
Um,
so
Go
can I
ahead.
jump in here? So
Yeah, please.
at one point we were the world leaders in deep geological repositories, and other countries came to us to learn from our lessons learned as we drove forward with the program. But like a lot of other countries, we stopped. We took a time out from where we were with the deep geological repository. Okay, so I want to contrast this with the UK, where NIREX was driving down the path of finding a place for the UK high-level waste and spent nuclear fuel. And then the government decided, hey, time out, we need to reconsider where we are. And now, with the resurgence in new nuclear and everything, the government has decided we need a geological repository, we're going to move forward, right? So we're still in that timeout phase where we're trying to decide what to do as a government. I think that it's important to realize that when and if we do decide to move forward, we're not going back to square one type of thing. We have a lot of lessons learned, a lot of capability that we've maintained. We can probably move quite quickly to implement a repository if and when we're directed to do so, Steve. But we just want to stress again, we are not alone in the fact that we stopped and then many other countries have restarted. Okay. In fact, I will be attending the EDRAM meeting in Tokyo later this year, where all the countries that have geological repositories will be meeting to discuss, how they're doing, their issues, and stuff like that. So, okay.
So still on the repository subject for a second, and this is a little self-serving for ANS, but I'm going to say it anyway. ANS has had the position that, okay, we can't fix everything all at once, but let's do what we can do, and pointed out that the area of generic repository standards is one where we need to take some action. So I've got a question that I'm going to read from the audience here. It happens to be from Andrew Zach, who is on the Senate EPW staff. And Andy says, I understand that there is a great interest in EPA undertaking an update of its generic repository standards. EPA could initiate this project without a change of law. Does DOE support EPA updating its generic repository standards to help lay the foundation for a non-yucca repository as part of a comprehensive nuclear waste management policy? If so, has DOE communicated the support to EPA and/or Congress?
As DOE, we are in conversations with our sister organization, and it's very important that as we move forward with this and the program starts to move forward, that all the different government agencies are adequately funded and move forward together, right? So looking at the possibility to reduce the time scale that we're going to be looking at for the behavior of a repository, that's not the correct way of saying it, but we as DOE are very interested in what's going on there. We see it fits into the direction of the program where we would like to take it. But it also is very opportune with us going back to look at the total system performance models, being able to use the new timeframes in those total systems performance models will help us choose and make decisions wisely moving forward. Okay. So am I ready to say we strongly support it? I can't say that today because we haven't made a decision, but we as DOE will share information with EPA to help them when they are funded to move forward with that program. Okay, but it would be it fits in almost exactly with where I'm trying to take the program. Okay.
Thanks. I'm going to ask you one more repository question, related question, and then shift into the transportation scenario here. But with respect to repositories, we've had a number of questions that relate to borehole disposition of spent nuclear fuel. And I'm rather than ask a specific question there, I'm just going to kind of throw it at you. And are there any comments you want to make about borehole disposition of spent nuclear fuel, how that might fit into the whole picture, and what if anything is DOE doing about
it? So we are doing some generic borehole work just to keep appraised of what's going on, Steve. So there's a work package within DOE managed by the national labs looking at this. Because we have to keep appraised of everything that's happening in the industry. But think of it from my perspective. My program, and so one of the things I'm directing, so I'm trying to be politically correct here. So in my program, we would do no ifs, buts, or maybes, right? We will only address problems that are directly ahead of us. Right. So at the end of the life of the current nuclear fleet, 140,000 tons of used nuclear fuel will be DOE's responsibility to dispose of. At the moment, they're all being loaded into dual purpose canisters. Right? So as DOE, can I dispose of, I don't have to accept them, but could I, if I do accept them, can I dispose of them into a repository without having to repackage those dual purpose canisters? If I have to repackage dual purpose canisters, then the cost to the people paying for the repository, the taxpayers, the utilities, and the defense program, it's going to be very, very significant. We're costing billions of dollars potentially to have to repackage DPCs to dispose of in a repository. Could you repackage 140,000 tons of used nuclear fuel and put it in the borehole? Potentially you could. Nothing's impossible. From a cost from dollars and a cost from dose to the workers, is that something you want to do? I'm not sure it is, to be honest. But do deep boreholes have a place? If the country decides that we're going to basically potentially recycle, reprocess, then maybe some of the waste forms could be disposed of in the deep borehole. Some countries with small volumes of spent nuclear fuel could potentially benefit from deep boreholes. But at the moment in the US, there's also the requirement for retrievability of waste in case we ever decide to do something with it. Putting it down a deep borehole is going to make it very difficult to start retrieving packages to be able to do something. So once again, I want to stress, deep boreholes have a place. What that place is, I really can't see disposing of 140,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel. Would it benefit other countries? Yes. Okay, so that's my position.
Fair enough. As promised, I'm going to switch into the transportation realm for a little while. You kind of got our feet wet on this when you talked about the package performance study, and I think you were implicitly acknowledging that while transportation may be one of the safest endeavors, transportation of spent fuel and high-level waste may be one of the safest endeavors in the history of the world, the perception of transportation risk is much greater than that. And we need to be acutely aware of that and address that fact. So I've got a question here with respect to transportation and WIP from Chris Plott. It says, what lessons learned can be taken from the transportation of spent nuclear fuel to the waste isolation pilot plant to bolster the future handling of spent nuclear fuel?
Well, we actually do have a working group with EM to exchange lessons learned and stuff. For public outreach that WIP did to support for transportation is something that we will probably we will do for any future transportations. When we move the high burn at Democas, we will remember the time frame is short. This is an R&D shipment, but we will try and do as much outreach and public interaction along the route of that cask as physically possible. We will run a dummy cask ahead of us so people can actually stop and see it. So we do listen to EM and we do interact with EM, and we will take the lessons learned from EM is the short answer. Okay.
Yeah, great. Another topic that we've had a number of questions come in on is reprocessing and recycling. And so similar to the question, kind of a general question I threw at you related to boreholes, I'd like to get your perspective on reprocessing and recycling, how they fit into the picture here and abroad. And I know you have a lot of experience in the area, so feel free to take advantage of that and educate us a little bit.
Okay, so my history is when I first joined the United Kingdom Atomic Energy Authority, reprocessing fast reactor fuel, and then supported BNFL in the design, build, commissioning, and operation of their reprocessing plants at Sellafield. And then I joined AREVA to work on the GNEP studies to look at reprocessing in the US. So this is, as you rightly say, Steve, a little bit of experience in reprocessing. At the end of the day, okay, things take a long time in the nuclear industry. No matter what people tell us, things take a long time in the nuclear industry, right? So let's compare and contrast against my program for a minute. Right? So late 2030s, we opened the first, I hope, of the consolidated interim storage facilities, monitor-retrievable storage facilities. And we start moving fuel. Some point later, hopefully, we will open the long-term solution for the spent nuclear fuel, right? We 140,000 tons, so we on average move 3,000 tons a year. We will take 47 years to move the spent nuclear fuel from the consolidated interim storage facility to the deep geological repository. Then the DOE high-level waste, and then in between for spent nuclear fuel from the naval reactors. So we're talking about a program which, as we sit here today, is over 100 years long. During GNEP, working with AREVA, we looked at what it would take to build a pilot scale reprocessing plant based on today's technology. Right? Copy and paste of what's been done before, modified for the US, modified for the US requirements. Start to finish is about a 20-year project from starting with design, licensing, commissioning. So 20 years. So could you conceivably build a reprocessing plant during the time frame that we have here? Well, yes, you can. One of the other constraints during this massive time schedule we're looking at is how long can we really keep extending the life of the current reactor fleet? Right? Remember, I worry about it because it's the operational reactors. If the fee ever started again, the operational reactors pay into the waste fund. When those reactors are gone, they don't pay into the waste fund. So at a certain point in the future, the current fleet will be no more. Right? If you reprocess, you have to have a customer for the product that you're reprocessing. Right? Remember, my program will deal with no if, buts, or maybes. Right? So if you can start and build a facility quickly enough, then you have customers for the products, then you can potentially do recycling. Right? Will we take and dispose of the high-level waste from reprocessing? I believe, and I have to check with General Counsel, but I believe that the US Deep Geological Repository will take high-level waste from reprocessing. Okay, but remember, it's the schedule and time frame we're currently talking about. So just to put it in perspective, you know, my two grandchildren were born late last year, right? they, they will be old and retired, and we'll still be moving material into the repository on this current schedule. To me, that's personally unacceptable, by the way. Okay.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I want to, there's a couple other places I'd like to go while we're here, and we're getting a bunch of questions on a wide variety of topics. Let's talk about for a second, get back into consent-based citing a little bit more, because that's, I kind of refer to that sometimes as the flavor of the month. DOE has phase one of a consent-based citing program going forward, looking for a consolidated interim storage facility site. And that started before you took the reins of the program. So what's your perspective on consent-based citing overall? And I'm also curious, do you have a definition of what it means? Because that seems to be a common question when the topic of consent-based citing comes up.
So consent-based citing, and Steve, you got to forgive me. I'm a mechanical engineer, right? So by training, I'm a mechanical engineer that stumbled into nuclear, right? So 44 years later, I'm still doing nuclear, right? So consent-based citing, if you look at the history of our industry, how many projects can we point at have started and failed, or stopped, or stagnated? We have private fuel storage where the utilities tried to build a consolidated interim storage facility there in Utah, stifled and stopped. G. Morris up in Illinois, the reprocessing plant never started. The Barnwell reprocessing plant stopped. Yucca Mountain stopped. The two private initiatives stopped, right? So we keep running into this brick wall of, and being surprised by the fact that we don't succeed. So it's all about trust at the public level, the stakeholder level at the bottom, right up to the government level, right? The governor, the elected officials, Congress. So we've got to build that public trust. So it's got to be an iterative process where we got to try something and adjust the program as we go. Right? So to begin with, we will try and talk to members of the public and other stakeholders and the tribes to get their feedback and issues and concerns about spent nuclear fuel, transportation of spent nuclear fuel, and stuff like that. At the same time, we have other major stakeholders in certain states. The utilities are stakeholders. Right? They operate their current fleet. They're looking at coal to nuclear. They're looking potentially at new nuclear. So they are major stakeholders in this game. EM is a stakeholder. Remember, EM is operating the cleanup sites. Remember, also, it's the schedule we're working on. Let's take Savannah River as an example. Savannah River, the Defense Waste Processing Facility, which I toured before it went hot many, many years ago, finishes its mission in about 10 years' time. Right? So it turns off. So no more high-level waste will be produced at Savannah River. It turns into a de facto storage facility. Right? If we're ever going to get the opportunity to site these nuclear facilities, it's got to be on a consent-based trust basis. Right? Consortia are just one aspect of it. As DOE, we're doing other things to interact with people, build trust, build the entire process, removing the fuel, siting the fuel, everything. So is it a perfect system? No, but it's what we're going to try, and we'll adjust as we go along, Steve. But it can't be a prescriptive list either. Right? We have to have 400 signatures on it to allow us to move forward. Okay. So,
I have a question from past ANS President John Kelly that appeals to me as a technical guy, and you're a technical guy, so we can leave maybe the politics aside for a second. What is the largest technological uncertainty in storage, transportation, and disposal? What do we know the least about? What do we need to know the most about that we don't know yet?
So, from my perspective, being a mechanical engineer, when you look at a fuel assembly, it's a robust piece of it's robust. It really is well put together. It's withstands the forces that it sees in a nuclear reactor, right? So the danger we have is making up concerns that we don't that aren't really there is an issue. We have to be scared of the unknown type of thing. So we don't know it, so we start to speculate what could be going on. Remember as well that fuel assembly design has changed over the years. You know, claddings have changed, number of rods in an assembly have changed. You know, even two manufacturers that make the same zirconium add different additives to the zirconiums, and not even the zirconiums ever change. But at the end of the day, it's a robust piece of hardware which we're sticking in a cylinder, and then we're going to take that cylinder and move it and put it in the hole in the ground, right? So to me, are there issues? Potentially there are issues. What are they? I'm not 100% sure yet, Steve. But as I draw out the program, I have to prioritize my R&D needs to fit the schedule that we're on. I have limited budget. I have to make progress, right? If there's an issue, can that issue wait? Will we have better information in 10, 15, 20 years? Well, maybe we will. Maybe muons will start working then, so we can actually see inside the cask. I don't know. You know, the industry is constantly changing as well. You know, today's high burn up is in, you know, we have utilities applying to put 6.5% enriched uranium into the reactors, go to a 24-month cycle, go to much higher burn up. So I'm not so much worried about what's happened in the past. There's maybe some of the things we're going to do in the future could potentially impact me. But once again, where I am now is I have 140,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel heading towards me with the current fleet. I have all the high level waste canisters coming. So no if, buts, or maybes. I will look at issues that, or material that my customers will produce. Okay.
Stepping back again and taking advantage of your international background. So unlike the US, some other companies are making significant progress, and a lot of our questioners have, or several have noted that. So I want to build on that question. As an example, Finland's constructing a geologic repository. Sweden, Switzerland, and France have selected repository sites, and they're working to get their final approvals. There's consolidated interim storage facilities in a number of countries overseas, including the UK, France, and Switzerland. So they seem to be able to do some things that we're trying to do but can't. Why is that? Why are they successful where we're not?
As I mentioned earlier, lots of countries have started and stopped and taken a timeout, right? And that's really where we are. We're in that timeout phase, Steve. We have time to think of what to do. And plus, we have an interesting market in that the utilities generate the fuel, but as DOE is responsible for picking the fuel up and disposing of it. So we have a slight disconnect in our market. And plus, the US is much bigger than many of these countries. So we have so we're much bigger. Where a country is small, the politics of these small countries are easily to manage. We're much bigger. Will we get there? I think we'll get there. remember the fuel is currently safe where it is, right? But at the end of the day, the problem is with the disconnect in the market, the DOE not picking the fuel up, the utilities basically sue the Justice Fund. The Justice Fund pays for utilities. That's status quo there. You know, there's no driver at the moment to move ahead. Okay.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we have to find something. When that time is, I don't know. I hope it's sooner rather than later. We're ready to move when we're given direction to move. Okay.
As you're well aware, there's lots of people, I would say an increasingly large number of people who are really looking to new nuclear power plants, nuclear generation as a means of addressing energy security and environmental issues going forward as a country. In other words, a growing recognition among many that we need more nuclear energy. But then when you talk to people, the most common concern you hear about nuclear energy these days is you don't have a solution for the waste. So do you have an answer for these people? And if so, what is that?
Question, Steve. So I so for spent nuclear fuel as it's discharged from the reactor, remember NRC licenses for design and the storage systems for the spent nuclear fuel, right? And by default, if NRC issues them an operating license, DOE will have agreed to enter into an amended standard contract with them to take their spent nuclear fuel. So from a regulatory and safety perspective, everything's good. But remember, to go back to the time frame we're talking about, right? We're looking at probably over, remember 2040 for interim storage, sometime later the repository opens, 50 years to start moving all the fuel there. Over that time span, we should expect the design, build some new reactors and those reactors to be decommissioned. And then what do you do with the fuel? And how long does that host community then hold the fuel? The UK actually issued a very good report just last week, in fact, dealing with the waste coming out of advanced reactors and it's given some very strong, relatively strong pointers to the advanced reactor community about the requirements for waste. I'd strongly recommend people who are about to in-depth launch off to design new reactors to read that paper. Okay, but it's not an easy answer to your original question, Steve. What do I say to new communities? If the interim storage facility is open, there's the potential to move it to the interim storage facility. But then, is that a long-term solution? No. Okay.
Okay. We had a question about, and I know I'm kind of responsible for this. We're bouncing around a little bit, but I'm going to bounce back to consent-based siting. We had a question about that, and it said, is there something special that DOE is going to do with respect to getting consent from the states? Because the problem in the past hasn't been getting consent from local communities for waste facilities like repositories and storage facilities, but it's been the states. Is there some magic potion that y'all have figured out that's gonna do the job here as far as states are concerned?
And we haven't, we really, so we do have some interactions with the states through different annual meetings that take place, the state governors meeting, all of that. So we do have some interaction with the states. At this stage of the consent-based siting process, remember, we are right back at the beginning here of starting to move the ball down the field. So we have not really started to engage at the state level. I fully understand what the listener's saying about every previous project has collapsed at the state level. And so at the right time, we will start to engage with the states. But now is not the right time. Now is our time to start really interacting with the members of the general public, and then slowly interacting with the state. Once again, I can't stress enough, the schedule we're on, if you overlay the election cycle on that schedule, then even to get to the interim storage facility by late 2030, if you start moving back, it's not the time to start engaging with the elected officials. Okay.
We've been talking a lot about the challenges that are facing you and the Department of Energy and what they're trying to do. How about some of the success stories? And we touched on one or two of them, but are there any other things you'd like to sort of highlight that we've been doing well or competently as a country over the last few decades with respect to managing spent nuclear fuel and high-level waste?
So, believe it or not, so after 44 years in industry, I joined DOE. And one of the real pleasures in joining it is the team of people that are actually working for me. So I want to give a shout out to them. They're really eclectic group. I got social scientists, I got engineers, I got people that used to work for UCRUM. I really, really like them all. They probably think I'm a real pain because I'm starting to change things, but they're a really great group of people. And I think, you know, we have the chance to do something here. Okay, so a chance to really start to move the ball forward. So I want to give a chance to shout out to those people, because DOE, everyone wants to beat on DOE all the time, but these are really, really good people. Success stories in the industry, we've had a few. You know, accident tolerant fuel is moving along quite nicely as a program. Higher enrichment fuel is moving along. You know, but there is successes here between DOE and industry. And I'm hoping that what we're starting here is going to be another success for the industry as well, Steve. Else I wouldn't have joined. If I didn't believe I could do something, I wouldn't have joined. So
yeah, so even in the waste area, I think we've had, you know, some successes. We talked about the demo program earlier. I mean, spent fuel storage and transportation have been done a lot in the U.S. with, essentially, no problems. Nobody's ever been harmed as a result of radiation releases, et cetera. So maybe maybe things aren't quite as bad as they might appear.
It really comes down to public trust and building that public trust. So this becomes commonplace to people. You know, if you mention nuclear waste or spent nuclear fuel, people's perception is the green drums of goo that you have on The Simpsons. You know, that's what people think about. It's really building up the public trust. It's got to be as well. It's got to be DOE out there talking to people. We have to be out there as representatives of the federal government, actually out and engaged with these communities. We can't be sitting in our ivory towers back in Washington, D.C. We actually have to be out, and people have to be able to press our belly button and ask our questions of us about what's going on. So that's what we intend to do as we move forward, Steve. It's all about public trust at this moment in time. The science is there. People just, it's got to be a common occurrence for spent nuclear fuel to be moving. Yeah, happens all the time in Europe. No issue. Okay, why? How do we implement it here? Is the question. Okay.
Now that you've been doing this for a few months anyway, so I'm going to go back a little bit and ask you, what's your biggest surprise so far? what has what's the biggest learning moment or unusual thing that's happened to you as NE8, the head of the DOE waste program?
I think that once again, my team is tremendous. And I never realized that being outside of DOE. The other thing that really strikes me now is as a community, as a nuclear community, we all know the right answer. We all say the right answer. But we all lose that message when we're trying to convey it to the policymakers making the decision. It's to me, it's a simple message. We got to start slowly moving, making baby steps to build trust, capability, the infrastructure we need to succeed. And I think that's the biggest surprise to me, Steve. Everybody agrees we need to do this, but we can't carry that simple message forward. Okay.
One of the questions that we got was they want to take your job away. why not take DOE government out of the picture and transfer the waste fund to the industry and put the industry in charge? What do you think about that? It sounds like a simple answer, right?
I've only been here for 5 months. So there's lots of talk about trying to move. So the Office of Civilian Bad Waste Management, it could be stood up again tomorrow if it was so desired. Nothing's stopping that moving forward. Just moving us out and giving it to industry, it doesn't really buy you anything to begin with. It doesn't. You have to set up all the processes, the procedures, everything. You're starting from zero to build an organization, right? And plus, you start to lose all the public trust that we've started to develop now. It is the ultimate answer, FedCorp. That's not for me to decide at this moment in time. Like I can't. I work at the direction of Congress, but should it move out at the right time to be its own standalone organization? I think it probably merits closer examination, Steve. But once again, at this moment in time, I'd caution, let me get the program moving. Let me start to build public trust and the infrastructure necessary to do this. And then's the time to start talking about trying to break this part of DOE out into something else.
That sounds great. We're coming to the end of the hour. I'm going to ask one more question from the audience, and this is from Mark Richter of NEI. Would it be fair to say that there may be a new DOE focus on practical tools like inspection, repair, and mitigation? I think this is with respect to dry storage of spent nuclear fuel, rather than more open-ended materials and corrosion research questions on cast degradation.
All the R&D programs that we will instrument, all the R&D programs that we will start moving forward will have a defined goal, a defined scope, and will address real world issues as we move forward. Right? What those R&D programs are, remember, this is the end of month 4, but that is going to be the mandate moving forward. We've been doing research in some areas for decades now. I need answers to problems, right? I can't keep just funding R&D. I must have answers to. If I invest money for an R&D problem, I must have an answer to that. If this is something I'm passionate about, I've done numerous large R&D programs before. You have to have a defined scope, a reason for doing it, and you have to have an answer at the end of it. And if your answers do more R&D, then that's the wrong answer, to be honest. Okay.
Thanks very much. As I said, we're coming to the end of the hour here. I want to thank our audience for all the great questions. Blame me for the fact that I only ask a fraction of them, but hopefully we were able to address at least some of the questions that people had. Paul, I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule and your large responsibilities to have this discussion. I think it's been very helpful for me and hopefully for others. And with that being, thank you, A&S, for giving us the opportunity to have this conversation. And so with that being said, I think we're done.
Stay safe. Thank you.